Hey, thanks so much for checking out the Selah Leaders podcast. My name is Nick Newman, and we are so excited to have you for episode 2 of season 3. Come on, I am here today with our podcast guide, Drizzy, a.k.a. Darren Zook.
The nicknames sometimes that you give me, and the Drizzy thing, I'm just like, it's too close to other celebrities that we've seen kind of take some really poor moral decisions in their lives.
It's true. So, yeah. It's true. And that is not how you ended up with nicknames like that.
I'm grateful that it's not.
Yeah, so I won't share any more details there. But hey, we're so glad that you're here, and man, we're going to have a great time today as we dive into just unpacking some amazing things, but I also want to make sure before we go too far into the episode that we highlight something for you. At Selah Leaders, we host an event called the Lead Pastors Getaway.
That's right.
And if you're a lead pastor that listens to this or checks this out, and you have not been on a lead pastor getaway with us, maybe even if you serve as a campus pastor, we would love to have you join us. Fall events have been posted. Dates are up.
Come on.
Go check out October. These events take place in North Carolina. It's a great opportunity for you to hit pause. If you're like, man, North Carolina is too far, give us some time. We're working on some stuff for 2026, and it's going to be amazing. Yeah. So be sure to jump into a lead pastor getaway.
Yeah, they're truly one-of-a-kind experience. Learn more about just ultimately who you are, who God has created you to be, but not just as a son, but also ultimately as a leader, and how ultimately we can lead. I'm saying ultimately a lot. I do have a tendency of doing that, but how we ultimately can lead. There,
you did it again.
How we lead most effectively with just what God has planted in each and every one of us.
Yeah, I love that. So be sure to check that out. It's leadpastorsgetaway.com, and we would be honored to have you there.
Yeah.
We are going to talk about something that is raw and interesting today. I was trying to figure out what to do for episode 2 of the Selah Leaders podcast for season 3, and I was really stuck for a little while, and part of it has been that I've been feeling this need to shift something, like need to make a change. And so I wanted to talk about, like, how do you recognize when it's time to make a change?
Yeah.
How do you know that what you're facing or experiencing is an indicator that it's time to make a change? And then how do you actually go about changing it?
Right.
And so as we've navigated this podcast, I made a joke in episode 1 of season 3 that, like, I don't really do podcasts for this long. Like, normally,
yeah.
I'm more like a one season kind of guy, a mini series type thing. And I've been feeling for probably about 6 months or so that I knew, not that this podcast was coming to an end, but the way we did it was in need of a shift, because it became more of an activity that we did rather than something that was really fueling the mission.
Yeah.
Like, you and I would get to the spot where we'd be like, shoot, we got 5 days before we're dropping a podcast. Like, let's get something on the calendar. Yeah. And when I'm not prioritizing something to the level it needs, it's probably a good indicator that some things need to shift and turn.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's good. I mean, and I think for all of us, there is a point that we reach where it's like we recognize that there's patterns that we've built. Maybe it's even in your career, that there's something that you realize, hey, I'm actually, I don't have the passion, the fire, the excitement that I did. And I know for a lot of business leaders, that's something that they can struggle with on a regular basis. It's like, 100%. Hey, especially if they're the innovative type, they're the forward thinkers who are trying to look further ahead, and they're just not seeing it anymore.
Yeah.
Like, that can be a huge challenge. And I think for ministry leaders, that also can be something that we face from time to time, where it's just something has gotten stale and maybe a change is in store. So unpack this a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I want to make sure that we talk about it as a team quite a bit. I love why we do it, not what we do.
Exactly.
And if you never get to the spot where you're evaluating those things or really like open to change, you'll be busy, but you won't be building.
Right.
And I want to make sure that I'm building, not just busy.
Yeah.
Like whatever I'm doing is actually building to get us to where we want to be, or at least in the same direction as we want to go. Not just putting more activity on the calendar, because I got plenty of stuff on my calendar, right? So as we look at it, I'm going to give you the process, and you'll see kind of after this episode some changes that we're making to the Selah Leaders podcast. This is also live and fresh. I'm only going to share some of it because
I don't actually know what he's talking about for some of this. So some of this is brand new.
Yeah, Darren doesn't even know yet, right? Yeah. So we're in like real raw process mode. And so how do you know, like, what do you do if you know something needs to change? One of the things that we've always said here at Selah Leaders is that we are a biblically focused podcast.
That's right.
We don't just give you good insights. We're going to give you Bible.
Come on.
So as Christian leaders, what do we do? The first thing is prayer.
It is.
Before making a move, we're going to seek after the face of God. And so as you go to pray and process, some of the stuff that I try and think through is God stretching me in this, or is he calling me to make changes to it?
Right.
You know, is God asking me to just work on it and to suffer? And it's not even to suffer, right? Because I enjoy what we're doing in this podcast, but like in the activity that you feel like something needs to change in, is God asking you to just persevere and keep on going, or is he leading you to make a shift? And I think that one of the stories that I always look to is in Nehemiah, where he has a burden for the brokenness of this city. But before he ever goes to the king to get released to go do the change, it says he stops and he prays, right? He seeks after the face of God. He doesn't just start rebuilding the wall. He prays and seeks after the Lord. And so instead of just making a change that you think would be good, my encouragement for you as a leader is to seek after God for what he would have you tweak and correct and make changes on. Take time to pray, seek after God for clarity, for wisdom, and really answer the question, what is God saying to me about insert the blank? Right. So for me, as I was praying through, like, hey, what is God saying about the Selah Leaders podcast? And I've been praying through that for the last couple of months, and I've got some good clarity now. Initially, I had nothing. And so 4 months ago, in my head, I'm going, we might not finish this year. Yeah. But God kept giving vision and clarity, and we're doing more than just finishing the 2024. He's given me some great stuff for 2025, and I'm really excited about it. But the first step in that is prayer.
Yeah. No, that's good. And I think anytime we're making any decision, I know for me personally, one of the very first things I do is sit down and pray.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, if I'm not consulting God above, who actually knows the future plans that he has for me before I do, then I'm doing it wrong. I've got something out of alignment. So I got to seek him first.
We have been in a building project for what feels like an eternity. and
2.5 years? 2 years?
Yeah, I don't even want to talk about it. But one of the things I always say about our building is that if God knows the end from the beginning, he already knows what the blueprints of this thing look like.
That's right.
Like they were written in heaven before they were ever written on earth. And so, Lord, would you align our steps, our vision, our direction, give us wisdom and clarity to see come to pass what you already know will exist.
Right.
And so that's what prayer does. It disconnects us from the world. It aligns our heart to God's to give us his eyes over a situation. So you know something needs to change. Christian leader, take some time to pray. Second thing we're going to do is we're going to move into planning, right? So you need to spend some time figuring out what is not working and why is it not working.
Right.
If you do not define the problem, you will not design the solution.
Yep.
All right. And we'll say it again for the people in the back.
That's good.
If we had a crowd, they would amen, right? Like if you do not define the problem, you will not design the solution.
Right.
And so as I took a step back and started looking at the Selah Leaders podcast, here were some of the problems that I started to define for me personally. Hey, it always feels last minute for me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't feel like I'm honoring Darren's time or his editing abilities by it being last minute for him. I forget that we have a podcast coming up.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, one of the biggest ones that I found is that my maximum creative energy is gone by 12 p.m.
Yeah.
I do my best creative work
In the morning. Yep.
And we're typically filming these at 7, 8 o'clock at night.
Right.
And so those were some of the problems that I started to be able to define, which were helping me look to what solutions could we put in place and build. And even thinking about, Nehemiah, what you find is right after he's praying, he goes to the king says yes. What's he do? He starts devising a plan.
Right.
If you're going to build anything, you need a plan for it.
Come on. That's good.
And as you do that, I would say one of the best things to do is like identify the gap between where you are and where you want to be, and try and figure out like what got you off mission.
Yeah.
And then write it down.
Right.
Like that's how it works. So the third thing, so first one's prayer, second one's planning, third thing is process. Mm-hmm. So you got to define the path forward.
Right.
What needs to shift, what needs to look different, and then how do we implement it? Mm-hmm. I will tell you, this is the one I'm the worst at.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I feel like I got the prayer thing down to a degree. The planning thing, I can identify problems like nobody's business.
Yeah.
I can also create the plan for what needs to happen moving forward. It is the implementation or the execution that I am not good at.
Yeah.
And so as a leader, you have a few decisions to make. Sometimes when we have problems, we feel the responsibility to fix them ourselves, but that is not leadership. Leadership is creating a clear path forward and inviting other people on the journey.
That's right.
And so as you think through the changes that you need to make with whatever it is, I will tell you, you will always go further faster when you do it with more people.
Right.
More people also probably creates the opportunity for more things to go wrong.
Yeah.
But they're probably not going right currently, or you wouldn't be thinking through changes.
That's true.
Right?
Yeah.
So I would say in leadership, when you design the path forward or the process that needs to be developed, small steps lead to significant shifts.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't have to be the big things. And as you take time to plan and prepare and think through stuff, you need to break down all of these big goals into very, very small steps.
Yeah.
You looked like you had a thought.
No, I'm in complete agreement. We're good.
Come on. So I think a biblical example of that is with Moses. God gives him this big audacious thing of setting the people free, but he didn't just go free Israel. God gave him a process to walk through that. I ultimately think that change is not a decision, it's a journey.
Right.
And so as you look to making some shifts and some changes, there's going to be a process that you walk yourself through and your team through to ultimately achieve the things that you want to achieve. So break it down into actionable steps. Bring some people on the journey with you. Who needs to know? Who needs to be involved? What's the timeline look like? And probably the most important thing you could define in this is, how do we know if we win?
Right.
One of the reasons why you never feel like you're successful is because you've never defined what success would look like.
It's true.
So give yourself some measurable things.
Success criteria.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like an example, in the church space that we lead in, I know we're winning when someone makes the decision to follow Jesus and then signs up for baptism.
Mm-hmm.
Because now they're not just declaring that they want to follow Jesus, they're actually taking the step to go public.
Right.
That's the win.
Right.
You would think that the win is just like somebody made the decision. I don't think decisions are that hard to make in worship experience moments. But when they take that next step,
Right.
that's the win for
Right.
me. So you've got different wins. Define those and then move in that direction clearly.
Yeah. That's good.
Come
That's
on.
good.
Fourth thing is this, pruning. As you begin to make shifts and changes, there is inevitably that was not a word.
You were close.
I mean, I about caught the Holy Ghost, right? We about broke out in tongues. There will inevitably be things that are still holding you back.
Yeah.
So one of the mistakes we make as leaders sometimes is we feel like the changes we make have to be perfect on round one, and they never are.
No.
You're going to make a change. You're going to make a course correction, and as you go to implement it, there are going to be things you didn't think of. There are going to be things that pop up because you're dealing with people.
Right.
And so the natural intricacies of life begin to happen. Man, I thought this new pace was going to work, but then my season or my schedule changed. None of that's working anymore. And so as you begin to think about these things, there's probably going to be a natural pruning that happens. So if we look at John 15, I love the way Jesus frames pruning for us. There's a vine dresser. He does two things. He cuts off the things that don't bear fruit, but even the things that do bear fruit, he prunes so that they might be even more fruitful.
Right.
So what's holding you back that needs to be cut off? But also, what is good but not great? Like, what is something that you're doing as you've made these changes that might be going well, but with just a little bit of cut back could actually enable you to do significantly more?
Right.
Like, what little things need to be pruned so that they might be even more fruitful? Because sometimes good things have to go for great things to grow.
Yeah, that's good.
Right, come on.
That's really good.
And so identify in pruning spaces, we identify distractions. We look at inefficiencies, or there's an individual, I don't remember who wrote the book now. It talks about sacred cows, and essentially they're like things that we love and that we idolize that ultimately should not exist in our lives. And so if you've got those things, I don't call them sacred cows. I'll call them grandma's couch, right? So maybe you had a grandma who had that old, ugly floral couch in her living room. The thing there wasn't even cushions anymore. It was just springs. The only reason why it still exists is because you have an emotional attachment to it. If that's the case and you have one of those old, ugly grandma couches in your organization, kill it. Get rid of it.
Yeah.
Upgrade it because it's no longer fulfilling its intended purpose.
That's good. Yeah. Just because it was a hand-me-down or a family heirloom, it doesn't mean that it's still effective in what it does.
We've always done it this way is not how we do leadership.
Come on. That's good. And you and I have had a lot of those conversations over the course of the last 6-9 months of like, hey, we've done it this way. Is this the right way to do it? Like, and those are healthy conversations to have.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because and some of it's not in practice, but in methodology.
Right.
Like a prime example of that, when we came out of COVID, we were having conversations about worship songs, and I used to be like a lot stricter would probably be the word. Like I was a little tighter on the songs we would do and songs we wouldn't do and things like that. But I think post-COVID, we came from a spot where we were shifting away. People were wanting less experience and more encounter.
Right.
And so that changes the whole framework of what we do and how we present it. And so I'm more open to some of those things. And we've had conversations like, man, back in the day, I would never do this song on a Sunday morning. But now, I mean, let's try it. I don't know what works anymore, you know, because we love why we do it, not what we do.
Come on.
And then the last thing is prayer again, right? So we're going to go through the process. We are going to pray Then we are going to plan. Then we're going to process. Then we're going to prune. And we're going to go right back to prayer. And the reason why we go right back to prayer is because, again, we don't love what we do. We love why we do it. And as Christian leaders, it's crazy that sometimes we trust God through change, but we stop trusting him after. And our lives in leadership will be an ever-evolving cycle and system of change.
Yeah, it's true.
There's going to be change at every turn. There's going to be a team member that leaves. There's going to be an organizational shift that's necessary. And we have to rely on God's strength more than our strategies, more than our systems, more than our anything else, because great plans without God's presence lead to failure.
Yeah.
And so we need God. So I would encourage you to keep praying, not just for God to get you through whatever change you need, but to have it a part of your daily rhythms, to pray and seek after God. You see this through the book of Acts, that they prayed through major decisions. It's a major part, because as things continue to grow, prayer continues to be a greater and greater necessity, because it's in prayer that God gives us wisdom and guidance and counsel to resource and build up the people that he's entrusted us with.
Man, that's so good. And honestly, change without God's presence, like you always can tangibly feel that something's missing.
Come on.
And so much of that is because we're leaning back on our own efforts rather than trusting God in the process.
Come on.
And so it is so incredibly critical for all of us that we lean into him. I love the fact that we open and close in prayer, because ultimately that means that we're putting, here I go with ultimately again, but we're putting it back into his hands.
Yeah.
Over and over again, Lord, we trust you with it. It's all about your plans, Father, not our own.
Well, and that could be a whole conversation in itself, because one of the mistakes that Christian leaders make is they actually believe it's theirs. We are managers, not owners.
Right.
Of anything that we've been entrusted with.
Yeah.
This thing called leadership is a gift from God.
Right.
A good manager manages according to its owner's priorities.
Yeah.
And if you're not in prayer in your leadership, you do not know what the owner's agenda is.
That's so good.
So seek after God in it. It makes all the big difference.
Yeah, and I think it's also important too that we recognize that knowledge of him comes from reading his word and ultimately living out what he has for us.
Yeah.
But at the same time, wisdom comes from walking with him.
Come on.
And walking with him sometimes means that as we go through seasons of our life, change comes from that.
Yeah.
But ultimately, if we're not consulting him in it, our priorities are out of order and we're leaning back into what we think is best rather than leaning into the knowledge that comes from wisdom from walking with him.
Come on. That's so good. Well, guys, thanks so much for joining us for this episode of the Selah Leaders Podcast. Kind of our closing thought for the day. Like my challenge for you is this. As a leader, you are going to face challenges. You're going to come up against something that needs to change. Here's the question. Will you actually do something about it? What is the one thing that you need to run through this framework that we gave you today? To pray, to plan, to process, to prune, and to pray again. I think if you do that, you'll be able to get clarity on what God wants you to shift, and then walk it out with boldness and confidence. We want to give a huge shout out to our Selah Leaders Podcast sponsor, WIF. They are an amazing organization that creates resources and lending opportunities for churches to help build facilities and impact the world through generosity, but also they do investment accounts. If you want to learn more information about WIF, you can do so at their website. We'll link it below. We hope that this message spoke to you, that you were encouraged and uplifted. If it made an impact on your life, we'd love to hear about it. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and share. And we're going to make some changes.
Come on.
I'm going to get off this podcast and go share some of those with Darren. And we're really excited to get to see you for episode 3 of season 3 coming soon. Hey, thanks so much for checking out this month's episode of the Selah Leaders Podcast. Darren and I are so grateful that you chose to spend some time with us today to check it out. But do us a favor, be sure to hit the like button, subscribe, comment, share it with a friend, family, or another leader in your life. It would truly make a huge difference.
Yeah, and if you'd like more information, jump over to selahleaders.com.